והמרחביה. Anandi, 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 Vamerchavya. Anandi, 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 Vamerchavya. Thank you.
Beautiful, Judy. Thank you so much. And I want to welcome everybody today. And it's so moving to me to study these Psalms with you every morning. And it's really a wonderful way to enter the day and move through the day. And it's traditional to dedicate study in memory or in honor of somebody. And so I'd like us to start that practice to think as we begin studying together, to whom do you dedicate your study today? It could be a memory of somebody who's no longer alive and whose memory you want to honor. It could be in honor of somebody who's sick right now and you want to study in honor of their becoming well. You could be doing it in honor or in honor of somebody who you want to celebrate today in your heart and spirit. So everybody take into your own thinking and your own mind somebody who you're going to carry with you for the study today. And our study will be in their honor or their memory and yours individually. And it's a way of adding a level of texture. Judaism believes that studying is a form of honoring the divine in the world. Study and prayer are similar in Judaism in that they have this power of opening up the heavens a little bit more and connecting us to the transcendent. So today we're going to review Psalm 1, and we might even move on to Psalm 2 today. And I want to just review a little bit. We're going to start by reading Psalm 1 again through in Hebrew, and then we'll read it. And now I hope you have different translations. And somebody wrote to me yesterday, and I haven't had a chance. I've fallen behind. Well, I can't actually blame this on the virus. I am way behind on email always. But somebody wrote to me to say that he objected to my using the word translation for some of the things we read yesterday. And technically, he's absolutely correct. And I was being a little sloppy. What we saw in some of the adaptions or adaptations that we read yesterday are really poetic renderings. And I try to make a distinction between what Robert Alter, for instance, is trying to do as to what Stephen Mitchell and Norm Fisher are doing, which is both very valid and important. And each can help us understand the deeper meaning of the psalm. So forgive me for being a little sloppy with my language, but absolutely. So let's start with the Hebrew. For those who can read the Hebrew, let's begin it together for Psalm 1. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzat risha'im, u'v'derech hata'im lo amad, u'v'moshav leitzim lo yashav. Bet, pasuk bet, verse 2. Ki im b'torat Adonai cheptzo, u'v'torato yegem yomam v'layla. Gimel, 3. V'haya ke'et shatul al palge mayim asher piryo yiten b'ito, v'yalahu lo yibo v'chol asher ya'aseh yatzliach. Daled, 4. Lochen harisha'im ki im kamotz asher tidfenu ruach. Hey, 5. Al ken lo yakumu risha'im b'mishpat v'chata'im ba'adat tzadikim. Vav, 6. Ki yodea Adonai derech tzadikim v'derech risha'im toved. Now, in English or whatever your vernacular is, use one version that you want to, either what's in the book or maybe one of the ones that you yourself wrote. Fortunate is the man who has not walked in the counsel of the wicked, and in the way of the sinful he has not stood, and in the seat of the scornful he has not sat. But only in the Torah of Adonai is her desire, and in her Torah she meditates day and night. She will be like a tree set into the ground near streams of water, which yield its fruit in its season, and whose leaf does not wither. In whatever he does, she will succeed. Not so the wicked, who are like the chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand up in judgment, nor the sinful in the assembly of the righteous. For Adonai regards the way of the righteous, and the way of the wicked will be lost. So as I pointed out yesterday, we see the same words for different versions of losing the direction of holiness, Rishaim, Chataim, Leitzim, used throughout the psalm. And the word which emerges at the end of the psalm for righteous or just or people who seek justice or seek holiness, tzaddikim, used at the end. I want to repeat what I said, that the word for Adonai, for Hashem, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the biggest word we have. And this psalm, which begins the 150, is part of what we call the wisdom psalms. So let's look again. And I want to ask people, if you want to speak, please raise your hand or indicate. And thank you, Sasha, for being back. Thank you, Harold, for helping yesterday. And maybe we'll have a team of people who can, so nobody has to do it each time. But we have Sasha and Harold and sometimes Nora, who are all proficient with this technology and can be helpful with this in different days. But so if you want to respond, we're looking at the one translation of Alter, and then Norm Fisher and Stephen Mitchell. Does everybody have those different versions of Psalm 1 in front of them or have access to them? So let me hear if somebody, we're going to just take a few comments. Let's see if we can have a few comments of responses to these 3 different versions of the Psalm. Julia Porper has a raised hand. So Julia, would you, or I think Sasha has to unmute you. Is that right, Sasha?
No, I just wanted to say, Rabbi, that my mother's yurt site is actually starts this evening. Her 26th is Nissan 1. So I just definitely wanted to do a shout out in the memory of my mom.
So you're studying in memory of your mother.
Yes.
Why don't people put in the chat for whom you're studying today, in memory or in honor of somebody? Put it in the chat, okay?
I just really wanted to mention it because it's today, Rabbi.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Julia. May her memory be for a blessing. So looking at these 3 versions, did one move you in particular? Did you love a phrase in one? Did something in one feel particularly resonant? I know this is a hard structure to do it. Okay, so I want to read through, if nobody wants to respond to that, I'm going to read through them again. And maybe we could, I'm not sure, is it possible if we start with the Robert Alter to put it up on the screen? And then we're going to move on to, so the Robert Alter, and remember, and we're going to come back to Alter. His book is he cares very deeply about trying to get into the English the rhythm, the poetry of the biblical Hebrew, which is why his translation is very interesting to read. It's not going to be new agey or creative in that way. And by the way, I posted on my Facebook page the version of the Psalm that Shir Yaakov Felt wrote for Psalm 1. And he took the one sentence, the verse, he took verse 3, like a tree standing by the water, and he put it in the first person. I want to be like a tree standing by the water. That's who I want to be in the world, which is beautiful. So if you want to hear his, and as I said, he's doing a project every single day. He's taking a piece of a psalm and setting it to music. So I don't yet know how to do that onto Zoom. It's on my Facebook page. And it's lovely to hear him trying to do a version of what we're doing, which is very, very, very Jewish in times of fear and anxiety, to study the entire book of Psalms and to move through it psalm by psalm. We're not doing it one a day, but okay, now we're going to read. This is Robert Alter. Happy the man who has not walked in the wicked's counsel, nor in the way of offenders has stood, nor in the session of scoffers has sat. So you'll see, as I pointed out yesterday, we're not ready yet. In verse 1, the format of the page shows you the 3 different ways. The first, counsel, you're not listening to what somebody says, not standing where they are, and then third, not sitting where they are. So one is an increased level of engagement with evil, so to speak. But the Lord, notice the word Lord is a small capital case, meaning the 4-letter name of God. But the Lord's teaching is his desire, and his teaching, he murmurs day and night. Again, the capital H in his means God. The small lowercase he means the person about whom we're writing. Okay, next page. Verse 3, and I'll do better at photocopying this. And he shall be like a tree planted by streams of water that bears its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. The third verse in a 6-verse poem or psalm is the fulcrum verse. It's the verse around which the whole psalm rests. So the first two verses are leading up to it. And this is really describing what a person who lives in holiness or cares about increasing holiness in the world rather than decreasing, what is that person like? And and throughout the Psalms, we'll see natural references. The Psalms are very beautiful. And you'll notice that, by the way, especially in the Psalms for Kabbalat Shabbat, where the natural world is held up and images of the ocean and of trees and mountains, very, very powerful images of God's world. So who is the most holy person, the person who's living a life so deeply yearning for God? That person is like a tree, not only with the high branches and tree tops, but deep roots that are planted by nourishment, by streams of water that will forever be nourished, that bears fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and what he does, he prospers or succeeds. And then we contrast with the next verse, not so the wicked. And what's the contrast here? If one who seeks holiness is like a deeply rooted tree, one who is seeking superficial, finite, instant gratification is rather like chaff that the wind will drive away. What a powerful contrast. Therefore, the wicked will not ultimately stand up in judgment, will scatter in the wind, and nor offenders in the band of righteous. For the Lord, again, the biggest word we have for God in Hebrew, embraces, loves, is waiting for us. This sentence shows us that God waits for us and will embrace us if we act in these ways. Now notice it doesn't say perfection, it says righteous, trying to do the right thing. And the way of the wicked, and that has a lot of intention, meaning is lost, does not last. So the psalm really does contrast that which has permanence, and that which is impermanent, which doesn't mean mortal versus immortal. All of us are immortal. It means we're adding to the pieces of the universe which are infinite and without end, and is way beyond any one of us. Okay, let's look at the Stephen Mitchell, if we may.
I want to let you know, Rabbi, while this is coming up, there are a few folks with hands raised when you're ready.
Okay, so why don't we stop after altar and see what people want to say about the altar, Robert Alter. That's a good idea. Thank you, Sasha. Should you read the chat? Do they want to speak, or should we put it in the chat? What's the
Simon, Sherry, I'm gonna.
Okay.
You're unmuted for a second.
Yes.
Right.
I just want to point out in that fulcrum third verse, we've been talking a lot about the tree, but there's also the stream, and the stream clearly is Torah and teaching. So it has that very powerful imagery of
Beautiful.
A stream. I think we've talked a lot about the tree, but it's really the Torah teaching is central here. So I just wanted to.
Mayim Chaim, living waters, is essential. And by the way, tree also refers to, right? Tree is also Eitz Chaim Hi. It is a tree of life. Also is a reference to teachings. And by teachings, I really read this as much broader than, the 5 books of Moses only. But again, going into what is infinite and essential, but beautiful. And it also is indicating that things need to be nourished. A tree on its own without water is also not going to survive. No matter how strong and beautiful it might be, it will not last without nourishment. Okay, who else has a hand raised? To Sasha, can you call on people?
Harold has a hand raised. I'm unmuting you, Harold.
Trying to figure what the Hebrew would be without looking at it. And I thought it was interesting that the word for halach, which is walk, is used with atzat, counsel, where I would have expected the word halach to be used with derech, to walk along the path, walking in the counsel, and then sitting in the path.
So halach in that sense really means to go along with, to follow. So not necessarily literally, but to follow the advice or the counsel.
Thank you.
And it means, yeah, to follow in the way. Thank you.
Lisa, did you have a comment about now or something related to something else? Just write in the chat if you want to be heard right now.
Boy, we're getting better at this, huh?
I don't know where the chat is. I'm sorry. I'm switching back and forth. But right now.
Well,
Great.
it's good to know where the chat is. Do you see the chat on the lower bar of your screen?
It is.
When the shared screen comes up, you might need to re-click the chat button at the bottom. But we see your hand raised, so go ahead and talk.
Okay. So I was struck by how the ways in which the images of standing and flowing are always used in the psalm. So it starts with the offender standing and murmurs day and night. So you murmur right through it, and then the tree is standing and the wicked get blown away. So there's always this sense of either standing or sitting, either standing for the wrong things, or standing for God, or moving for the wrong, being blown away for the wrong things, or you get my point.
Yes. Thank you. Good point. Anyone else?
The next comment's about Mitchell, so I think we'll wait.
Okay. So let's look at the Stephen Mitchell. And as was pointed out yesterday, this is one of the pieces I want to teach you, is that the first thing to do is to try and understand what the psalmist is trying to say, to understand the Hebrew as best we can, although it's ancient language and we have to often guess in a certain way. And then the next step is to say, how would we take the words of the psalm and make them meaningful to us? So here's a version that Stephen Mitchell is offering us, and he's a poet. So I'm going to read it again. We started yesterday looking at this. Blessed are the man and the woman who have grown beyond their greed, have put an end to their hatred and no longer nourish illusions, period. But they delight in the way things are and keep their hearts open day and night, period. They are like trees planted near flowing rivers, which bear fruit when they are ready, period. Their leaves will not wither, their leaves will not fall or wither, period. Everything they do will succeed. So first of all, are there 6 verses even in this version of it?
It looks like, thank you, Tim. This might be the Norman Fisher.
No, what we're looking at right now is Stephen Mitchell.
Okay, so so I don't know why it says Norman Fisher on the top, Tim.
Okay, that's incorrect. This is Stephen Mitchell. I promise. And by the way, this is what the book looks like, the Stephen Mitchell. And I will be doing this for every psalm we use, so you don't have to buy your own. I know a lot of people are concerned about having things delivered. I will be photocopying. So yeah, so this is the Stephen Mitchell book, for those to see it. And you can see it says selected and adapted from the Hebrew. So any thoughts or reactions to the Stephen Mitchell you'd like to share? As I pointed out yesterday, there's no reference to God in Stephen Mitchell. Not only is there not, as Robert Alter made us clear, that we're talking about one particular word of God, God is removed entirely from this psalm. And there's an attempt to deal with gender by adding man and woman, and otherwise no reference to he or she. And keeping it as they, referring to a collective here of man and woman, meaning everyone. Is Mitchell Reform? I don't think Mitchell identifies in that kind of way at all. It's not a matter of denominational. He's a poet, and this is his understanding of the Psalms. So notice how, any comments? Oh,
Yes,
some
we do,
raised
if this
Okay.
is a good
hands.
time.
It's a good time for comments.
Donna, can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Yes. Hi, everybody. So I have the Stephen Mitchell book, and this happens to be the Psalm and the version that I was using for the Psalms initiative over all this time. So
you know it well.
I saw that Hannah put down that the beginning is seems personal, and I think that's why I like it, because I can really relate to it. And you know, the idea that blessed are the men and women who have grown beyond their greed and have put an end to their hatred and no longer nourish illusions, but they delight in the way things are. You know, it makes me think that so much of the bad that comes in this world is because people are resisting what is or not being with what is. And as soon as there are defenses against what is, that's how we create greed and hatred and all kinds of illusions. So, you know, and when you are surrendered to accepting what is, and your heart is open, then things flow in your life.
Yeah.
And when you're not, things do not.
That's beautiful, Donna. And you'll notice that that Stephen Mitchell in this version, in the first verse, echoes the triad of the original Hebrew. He is giving his own understanding of it, but you see he has the first one, Asher lo halach b'atzat rashaim, who doesn't follow the advice of the wicked, who's grown beyond their greed. Uvederech chataim lo amad. So even in his structure, even though he's gone into a different understanding, he's using that structure. And then same thing with verse number 2. They delight in the way things are and keep their hearts open day and night. Ki im b'torat Adonai cheptzo u'v'torato yageh yomam v'layla. And verse 3, they are like trees planted near flowing rivers which bear fruit when they are ready. So again, very much echoing. And then verse 4, but he very much leaves behind verses 5 and 6, which is really interesting. What he's doing, he's only saying the positive, so to speak, which is what he's doing is exactly what my instructions are to all of us, which is pull out from a psalm what would make it meaningful to you. But it is interesting that the identifying evil, this Stephen Mitchell is not comfortable with doing. He wants to stay only in the positive. And that's a very interesting exercise. It's taking everything from the psalm and only doing it in the positive. Other comments about Stephen Mitchell?
We do. We're going to Stephen, then Sandy and Hillary. Just a little note, some folks are calling in on the phone, and if you want to participate, if you press #9 or try *9, you can raise your hand and we can call on you and unmute you. And I just want to do a little shout out to my mom who's listening. Hello, Mom.
Asha, Mom.
Okay, let's go to Stephen.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So first of all, I just want to say that I'm grateful to be here with all of you every morning this week. It's been a great way to get motivated and to start the day. The two things I wanted to say is, one was a comment on another interpretation, not on this one, but I just wanted to say when we were studying about putting holiness into the world or taking holiness out of the world, before this class started, I had been up very early in the morning and hadn't slept that night, just out of the anxiety that we all have. And I thought to myself, okay, you have to get out of being negative and just reach out to everybody, even to somebody who maybe you have some sort of past issue with. Just put out negative, positive energy. And then I went to take a shower. I came back out. I told that to my husband, and then I sat down, and the first thing that you said, Rabbi, was about putting holiness in, and that the more holiness you put in, basically the more positive you are, the more positive energy you get back. So I thought that was profound, that I got that message
Yeah.
10 minutes after I had decided it myself.
Well, this psalm then is for you.
And the other thing I wanted to say is that the part that I love the most about this psalm, about the Mitchell, is the line, which bear fruit when they are ready.
Uh-huh. Yes, I
Because
do. Love
because
that.
it's, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just find that so profound because we all want it. You know, it's like Trump wants by Easter Sunday for all this to be over. And it's like, it's not going to be over until the earth decides it's over.
Yeah.
And that's the part in that psalm that I find so powerful is, you know, which bear fruit when they're ready or in their own time, not when we want it to be, but,
So,
you know.
yes. Beautiful. Thank you, Stephen. That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
And now Sandy, can you unmute yourself?
Am I now unmuted?
Yes, you are, Sandy.
First of all, I am grateful for this study, Rabbi. I thank you so much. I missed it yesterday and my day was all off.
Sandy, they are being recorded, so you could also,
go back and get it.
you
Yes.
can get it. Great, terrific.
I love this because of its inclusiveness. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And the second thing is the whole question of acceptance and acceptance of the things we cannot change. If we can accept what's happening and stop, not fight it, there is a certain peace that comes with it.
Indeed.
It's going to be over. And as I mentioned before, I heard Debbie Friedman's Misha Bayrak this morning, and that also gives you a sense of peace, a sense of hope. And so it's been a peaceful, hopeful day, for which I thank you and thank everybody.
Sandy. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, and Hillary, can you unmute yourself?
Here we go. Hi. Yeah, so I just wanted to thank you for this. I wanted to just chime in because I know that the other version, the Norman Fisher version, Rabbi Kleinbaum, you had mentioned that it's there's some Buddhist influence, and I just want to note that I think there's some Buddhist influence in this one too, because right at the beginning, greed, hatred, and delusion are the three poisons in Buddhism.
Interesting. Thank you. Very interesting.
So I just thought I would put that out there.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that.
Okay, Gail Winter, can you unmute yourself?
Do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rabbi and Sasha. I love this interpretation. The only trouble, I'm not quite sure, is in the last line about everything they do will succeed. And I guess it's the wording of succeed that I'm kind of wondering about.
Yeah.
Because it almost doesn't feel as poetic as the rest of the interpretation, and I'm not exactly sure what he's saying here, other than, you will be positive, you will delight, you will, within yourself, you will be able to evolve.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do understand the word succeed and success differently than kind of a contemporary American materialistic one. So I imagine if you could get to a place of understanding success as something very different than that materialistic instant gratification, but a deeper sense of what success might look like, which is not necessarily on the surface at all. So that's the only way. I agree, it's a little jarring, the word itself, but yeah, and you have to do, I think, a little bit more work to understand. Unfortunately, Stephen Mitchell didn't write a commentary on his Psalms, so we don't understand what he himself meant, but that's why we're here to enjoy it and react to it. But that's how I would work with this, is to understand succeed as meaning something different.
Okay, thank you.
Than an American version of success.
And Amy, can you unmute yourself, Amy Prince?
Yes, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm happy to be here. This is such a great way to start the day. The line that really is staying with me is the idea of growing beyond your greed. It's not that We are greedy. We accept that we have these faults and
beautiful.
Accept that we have greed, but we can move beyond it. We can grow beyond it. And I just find that to be a really beautiful idea. So I just
and
want
I
to
think then, and I think success then would be, according to Stephen Mitchell, somebody who's able to grow beyond greed, put an end to hatred, and not nourish illusions. That might be what success means, right?
Yeah, and it really feeds into that, or supports that idea of a growth mindset where you say, for now, I don't have that skill or that character trait, but if I work towards it, then I can get it.
And Psalms are full of that concept of it's a movement. It's not a, you know, you don't turn a switch and you become something. It's constant work on ourselves. And that's throughout the Psalms. And we'll see that in many, many different ways as we move through the Psalms.
Thank you.
All right, how about a couple of more comments and then we're going to go to the Norman Fisher version.
Bella, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Bad name up there. And for me, what is most compelling is a view of humanity and comparing the two. And I put in the chat, in the other versions, the confrontation with the wicked is confronting something that's external. And here, it is internal.
Yeah.
So that is, for me, the most interesting, where the foundational, and I don't know, I mean, if that's truly the foundational aspect of the contrast of the two.
I believe that that is a piece of Psalm, and we're going to, again, and that's why this is going to be great for everybody to stick with this. We're going to see this question over and over again. And you'll hear even when I talk on Friday nights about some of the Psalms, I think they are function on these multiple levels, that they do talk about the internal, even though sometimes the language is external and nationalistic. And some of the Psalms get quite nationalistic, and you'll see that as we get, and those are even harder. But I think Stephen Mitchell's going in that direction is absolutely within the Psalm. It's harder to, and as you get more flexible with the language, you can start to look at the original language and see it there also. It's not there on the surface as much. And that's why poetry is so good to get to it. But I agree. I believe it's both. And I think that evil exists in the world inside of us and outside of us. It's not only inside of us, and it's not only outside of us. And danger exists inside of us and outside of us. And I think the Psalms are trying to get there. The language is sometimes hard to get it, but Stephen Mitchell raises that and lifts that part of it out. Absolutely, I agree with you. And that's why when we'll be writing our own Psalms or writing our own adaptations of them, those things might be most meaningful to us. And if you're in a time of war, you might be focused on some of the external things, but I think it's all embedded there. All right, one more comment on Stephen Mitchell, then we're going to go to Norman Fisher.
Ruth Berman gets the last comment. Can you unmute yourself, Ruth?
You there, Ruth?
Speak, Ruth, you're unmuted. There might be something happening with your volume on your end. Let's you and I troubleshoot, and Rabbi, if it's okay with you to go to Stephanie as the last comment, and
then Ruth, if you figure it out, or else tomorrow we'll hear from you.
Okay.
Okay, Stephanie.
Hi, does that work?
That works.
Okay, just joining today. Thank you so much, and
welcome.
Also for all of your support all week, everybody.
So sorry about your mother's death, and
thanks.
Glad to be sitting with you.
I since I missed so many classes, I wondered whether you could return to one word that you might have talked about a lot, which is shifting from happy is to blessed is.
Well, we haven't talked about that. Mitchell has used this. So we did talk about the word ashrei, which is first of all, and many different translators, poets struggle, and we're trying to watch how different people understand it. So and I talked a lot, which Stephanie, I know you're extremely familiar with, that translation is a form of interpretation. And because we're talking about a language that hasn't been spoken in 2,500 years, there's no way to really know what the written word means, because there are no informants to ask them. So we can only understand biblical Hebrew by comparing to how it's used in other places and trying to understand from context. So while Ashrei on the surface looks like it means happiness, we've seen that there are different translations used by many different people. So the one that I was using, one traditional one, is fortunate. We saw that some use praises or praised. And so this particular writer is understanding that it's a blessing for someone who has achieved these things. And he's definitely making a comment by using the word blessed rather than happy. And I think what he's trying to avoid, which we did speak about briefly, is that happy has a kind of a superficial feel to it, even though I don't think that's what it means deeply. And I think people who reject the word happy in the English are trying to come to something a little bit deeper. Although I think happy can be deep. I think they're trying to get to a level of, so you see sometimes is praised or blessed or fortunate or content, I've even seen used, just to try to get to an understanding that it's a level of, if you do the three things that are listed in this sentence in the Hebrew, you will achieve this opening word. We will also see, because tomorrow we're moving to Psalm 2, that the Psalm 2 ends with the word Ashrei in the last verse, which is why the Gemara, the Talmud, actually thinks these two Psalms are maybe originally one Psalm, because one starts with Ashrei and then Psalm 2 ends with Ashrei in the last verse. So it might be a poetic. The other thing is that the word Ashrei has the shin sound in it, which is repeated throughout that first verse. So and since we know that these were, of course, originally oral, there's a sh, the sh keeps getting repeated, which is a nice poetic alliteration. All right, let's go to the last version for today, which is the Norm Fisher version. If you can change the screen. And I'm holding this up. Norm Fisher was born Jewish, is a Zen Buddhist. So he calls these Zen-inspired translations of the Psalms. And this is what the book looks like, Norm Fisher's. So again, he's not trying to do a word-by-word translation. He's trying to, so I'll read this out loud. And again, look at the things that contrast with what we now know from the Psalm. And what is this particular poet or thinker trying to raise out? And we'll do this for our last few minutes. Happy is the one who walks otherwise than in the manner of the heedless, who stands otherwise than in the way of the twisted, who does not sit in the seat of the scornful, but finds delight in the loveliness of things and lives by that pattern all day and all night. For this one is like a tree planted near a stream that gives forth strong fruit in season, and whose leaf doesn't wither, and whose branches spread wide. Not so the heedless. They are like chaff scattered by the wind, endlessly driven. They cannot occupy their place. And so they can never be seen or embraced, and they can never be joined. What you see is always lovely and remembered, but the way of heedlessness is oblivion. So I want to point out one contrast with Mitchell is that Norm Fisher does deal with the negative or the evil or the, he doesn't just ignore it. He finds a way to embrace what it is and come up with a very creative and obviously a Zen-inspired translation. And note that his definition of evil, so to speak, or of removing holiness from the word is heedless. So you see heedless is repeated from the beginning, the manner of the heedless, not so the heedless, and then the way of heedlessness is oblivion. Okay, so a couple of comments of the Norm Fisher version. I see.
Okay, Judy Ribnick, unmute yourself.
Thank you. Rabbi, you've said a few times that the Psalms is taking the long view. In the short view, though, sometimes it seems like the chaff is not being scattered by the wind, or the heedless are not being not heeded. That people who are Rishaim or taking away holiness from the world have too much power in the world. And I wonder if you could comment on that.
I think that's exactly right, that we look around and it looks as if the Rishaim are succeeding and are having tremendous power. And I just think that the Psalm is trying to tell us, and religious tradition is trying to tell us, is that might be true in the short term. It's not true in the long term. And faith and hope is believing in that long term and understanding that although it looks like that right now, that's not true for the length of days. And that's hard to have that perspective, but it's essential, I believe.
Okay, Regina, can you unmute yourself? And Rabbi, it's 10:43.
Okay, so Regina, this is going to be the last comment for today. And then Judy will end us.
Yes, good morning. I'm struck in this psalm by referring to taking a seat and being seated, which is such a yoga kind of inflected activity, and brings to mind the other midday meditation that is very meaningful as well. So thank you all.
Beautiful. So I encourage everybody to stay with these versions, maybe speak with each other, get a partner this afternoon. Tomorrow, I think we're going to start Psalm number 2. Can you believe it? We're up to Psalm number 2. So please read that version that you have. And Psalm number 2 is used in some very famous classical settings. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. For those of you, when you read Psalm number 2, see if you recognize which settings, which very, 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 very famous classical settings use Psalm number 2. All right, Judy, would you lead us out?
Sure, I reposted the words today from Psalm 118, verses 5 and 6, Min HaMetzar. And I want to give a shout out to Joyce here for using the words, Joyce Rosenzweig, our wonderful music director, over the years having taught many of us the word painting. Listen to how this melody, which is familiar to many of us, it kind of paints the words, Anani, God, listen to us, listen to me, and it's repeated over and over again, Min HaMetzar, from the depths. Also, even just take the words in your heart from the depths and hoping that God will answer us and we'll find a way together to get through this. Min HaMetzar Karatia Anani V'Merchavya Min HaMetzar Karatia Anani V'Merchavya Anani 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 V'Merchavya Anani 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 V'Merchavya Min HaMetzar Karatia Anani V'Merchavya, with hope. Min HaMetzar Karatia Anani V'Merchavya Anani Anani. You'd see your hands. Anani V'Merchavya Anani 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 V'Merchavya. Ay, 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 maybe even a smile. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Take care, everybody.